Authorities in Greece confirmed the arrest of 9 crew members of fishing boat packed with asylum seekers that sank on Wednesday in the Mediterranean Sea. Russian President Vladimir Putin attended the plenary session on the 26th International Economic Forum in the city of St. Petersburg. In India, authorities report at least 5 dead and more than 20 injured after the impact of cyclone Biparjoy. Hello, welcome to From the South. I am your new anchor, Heidy Maurell, from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Guatemala is in the final stretch of the electoral process. There, the Partido Cabal, Integral Party in English, has confirmed that one of these table's monitors was assassinated along with her husband. Angela Lucero, a prosecutor for the group headed by Edmond Mulet, was shot and killed, along with her spouse on June 12. A statement from the political organization states the prosecutors was in training from the defense of June in 26, when he was attacked south of Guatemala City, the capital of the country. Hours before his announcement, the leader of the organization had already referred to violent events regarding an attack against its headquarters in Chimaltenango. On Friday, the students and authorities of the University of Panama denounced brutal police repression during a peaceful protest against a questioning mining agreement. The students tried to block the Trasismic Avenue of the capital. They rejected the contracts signed by the government with the subsidiary of the Canadian company First Quantum. A riot police unit neutralized the protests, suffocating all members of the university community, including children and neighbors, with tear gas. The rector of the House of Studies, Eduardo Flores, denounced the indiscriminate use of force. The protested mining deal was declared unconstitutional in 2017. Peru's president-designate Dina Boluarte ruled out on Thursday an early presidential elections in the South American country, despite the levels of disapproval and the call for new demonstrations to demand her resignation. Boluarte stressed that the issue of advancing the elections is closed and confirmed that he is working in a responsible manner, respecting the rule of law, democracy, and the Constitution, until 2026. After the statements, the parliamentarian of Juntos por el Perú, Rosa Luque, warned that he launched a clear threat and added that she wants to generate peace. He could resign so there can be early elections. On the other hand, the former presidential candidate, Veronica Mendoza, also rejected the statement of Boluarte and accused her of treason to the homeland. On Friday in Brazil, the central bank reported that Brazilian economy grew by 0.56% on April, compared to March after having fallen back by 0.15% in the preceding month. The Economic Activity Index, considered as a previous measure of Brazil's gross domestic product, accumulated a growth of 3.47% between February and April in relation to the previous quarters, according to data released by the Asian agency. The expansion of economic activities in April was 3.35% to compare to the same month last year, and the last of the last quarter was 4 to 0.6%. compared to the first quarter of 2022. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva stated on Thursday in an interview to the radio station that the Brazilian economy will surprise this year with an expansion that may exceed 2.5%. In Argentina, in the province of Jujuy, high school teachers, university professors, and indigenous people joined in a massive protest in Friday, demanding improvement for workers of the education sector. The protest started by teachers demanding better salaries, grew larger, involving indigenous people because of the expected approval of the controversial provincial constitutional reform. The reform, pushed by Governor Gerardo Morales and approved behind closed doors on Thursday night, in an expandedly speeded assembly process favored by the absence of leftist representatives, have been outcried as a legal restraint mechanism on people's right to protest, for it forbids the total blocking of streets and red blocks, as well as any other disturbance to right to the free movement. The reform also includes aspects pertaining to land and water resources, ownership claims in the detriment of the rights of indigenous peoples. A new report shows that 169 human rights activists were murdered during the 5 years that far-right President Jair Bolsonaro governed in Brazil. In Recife, our correspondent Brian Meir has more.
Well, President Jair Bolsonaro and his allies from Big Agro encouraged violence against groups like landless rural workers and indigenous people in Brazil. A new study released this week by the NGOs Justiça Global and Terra de Direitos documents violence against human rights defenders during his presidency, like the case of MST settlement coordinator José Severino in Pernambuco.
In 2019, we occupied land in Jordão, and I was beaten. I was kicked in the face and blacked out for about 5 minutes, and the guy next to me was shot in the head. But thanks God it wasn't a homicide, but we suffered a brutal attempted homicide that we in our settlement in Jordão that day.
The study documents 1,171 cases of violence against human rights defenders, including 169 murders. It accuses Bolsonaro of treating indigenous people and landless rural workers as central enemies to his government. It recommends that President Lula implement the actions defined in his transition team's plan for defending human rights activists and calls for structural reforms to eradicate conditions that lead to violence.
This is an important study which shows the grave conditions suffered by human rights defenders during the last 4 years. It's important that agrarian reform is implemented for family farmers and rural workers to better protect human rights defenders.
Brian Meir, teleSUR, Pernambuco.
And in the Brazilian state of Ceará, members of the homeless workers movement hosted an exchange with the Cuban children's theater company La Colmenita to learn about their world-renowned working methods. The main objective of this meeting was to learn about the methodology and philosophy of La Colmenita, a theater project that is internationally recognized by the United Nations Children Fund, UNICEF, for its effectiveness in educating children with human values. The activity took place in the Irma Teresa Rural High School and in the Caldeirão Taqueninho settlement in the central region of state Ceará. Founder and director of the Colmenita, Tim Cremata, praised the exchange, stating both parties have learned a lot as they've shared a common joy and fighting spirit. And let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok account at teleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Authorities in Greece on Friday confirmed the arrest of 9 crew members of the fishing boat packed with asylum seekers that sank on Wednesday in the Mediterranean Sea. The Greek Coast Guard say 9 Egyptian nationals between the age of 20 and 40 had been arrested on suspicion of criminal organization, negligent homicide, exposure to danger, and shipwreck. The Coast Guard said the arrest followed 2 days of interrogations in the southern Greek port city of Kalamata, where 104 survivors of the shipwreck were temporarily sheltered before being transferred on Friday to a center near Athens. Authorities say they have collated survivors' testimonies to determine the exact role of the 9 detainees, and they are expected to appear before a local magistrate on Monday. For their part, human rights advocates accuse the Greek government of neglecting those on board. On Thursday, protesters gathered in Greece's capital over the sinking of a fishing boat full of migrants. They mobilized in the capital's Syntagma Square, including representatives of the PAIM Trade Confederation, student associations, and the Greek Communist Party. Demonstrators blamed the immigration policies of the European Union and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization for the flood of migrants in the Mediterranean, turning into the Sea of Death. The sinking of the boat also sparked protests in other cities across the nation, including Patras, Larissa, Thessaloniki, and Lamia. On Friday, 9 crew members have been arrested for people smuggling after the packet vessel sank in the Mediterranean. The Dutch government is set to parliamentary so shut down Europe's largest gas field in less than 4 months, accelerating a closure timeline that may limit its supply reserve as it heads into the next winter. According to a spokesperson for the Dutch State Secretary for Mining, the Groningen field in the northern Netherlands will shut on October 1st. The field has been a key source of gas for much of Western Europe, as well as a backbone of Dutch public finances, since production commenced in 1963. However, it also led to hundreds of earthquakes with magnitude of over 3.6 since 1980s, which have damaged thousands of homes. In this sense, the Groningen Magnitude Damage Institute reported that over 300,000 homes in the region, at least 127,000 have reported some damage. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa arrived in Kiev on Friday as part of the African peacekeeping mission to find ways to resolve the Ukrainian crisis. In this context, the South African head of state and other members of the mission, including the President of Zambia, Hakainde Hichilema, Senegalese Premier Macky Sall, African Union Chief Azali Assoumani, and representatives from the Congo, Uganda, and Egypt, will hold talks with Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky to promote a plan that could provide a roadmap to Russian-Ukrainian peace negotiations. The African delegations will later travel to Russia to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Saturday. Before arriving in Ukraine as part of African peacekeeping mission, the head of the Presidential Protection Device for South American President Cyril Ramaphosa, Major General Wally Root, mentioned the delays and challenges encountered in Poland. Root highlighted that the South African government had obtained all the necessary permits and engaged the Polish government for 2 weeks before the trip. The head of the Presidential Protection Services said the cargo, which was offloaded from the plane, was loaded back in due to fears it being confiscated.
It never happened that we have stripped anyone with a diplomatic passport just to get us out of here. Right? Now, they say we don't have permits. We have permits. The only difference is now they say we can't bring a copy of a permit. We must bring the original. Now, some of us have original permits. Right? The embassy here printed permits because they thought it's not necessary to have the originals here. Right? Now all of a sudden we must have originals. They are delaying us, right? They're putting the life of our president in jeopardy because we could have been in Kiev this afternoon already.
On Friday, Deputy Russian Security Council Chairman Dmitry Medvedev assured the conflict between Moscow and Kiev will remain permanent if Ukraine aspires to join NATO. On his Telegram channel, Medvedev recalled when NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg ruled out Ukraine joining the alliance during the conflict, but still stressed that the door could remain open for Kiev. Medvedev also asserted that if a regime change occurs in Ukraine, the new political authorities will withdraw the request for NATO's membership. However, as long as it's not the case, the conflict will be permanent. teleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries throughout StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy a Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Russian President Vladimir Putin took part on Friday in the plenary session of the 26th International Economic Forum, SPIEF, which began on Wednesday in the city of St. Petersburg. Putin began his speech by speaking about the evolution of the economic situation in the Russian country amid growing pressure from the West. According to Putin, the truth of Russian business is to replace the multinationals that could not resist the strong political pressure from the West. The Russian president emphasized how, in spite of all the difficulties of the past year in his country, did not opt for the safe solution, but expanded its contacts with reliable and responsible partners in countries and regions which are now the engines and drivers of the world economy. The forum will take place until Saturday, June 26, and is attended by the delegations from more than 100 countries from all over the world.
Positive macroeconomic trends are gaining momentum and strength. In April this year, Russia's gross domestic products grew by 3.3% in annual terms, and by the end of the year, it will add more than 1%, as the International Monetary Fund believes, 0.7%. But in my opinion, and I agree with those of our experts who believe that the growth will still be more up to 1.5% and maybe even up to 2%, and this will allow our country to maintain its place among the world's leading economies.
On Friday, President Vladimir Putin hailed Russia's ties with United Arab Emirates, and he met his counterpart Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan in St. Petersburg. During the meeting, President bin Zayed Al Nahyan reinforced the importance of the communication and dialogue to support regional and international stability and peace. He reiterated the USA's position aimed at the escalation and the necessity for a negotiated political solution to the crisis in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the two leaders excused the long-standing relation as a part of the EAE, Russia's strategic partnership framework. Likewise, both leaders expressed their ongoing commitment to further build on the bilateral ties between the two nations. Iranian President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Sayed Ebrahim Raisi, arrived in Tehran on Friday after a tour of Latin American countries. The president stressed that the countries of Latin America and the Islamic Republic share the spirit of the struggle against the system of hegemony. Speaking to reporters upon his arrival at Tehran's Mehrabad International Airport, Raisi stressed that the Latin America is a strategic region that has been comforting the imperialist system for many years. The Persian leader remarked that the common point among many Latin American countries is to seek freedom, independence and justice, as well as to pay attention to the will of the people. Raisi said that during his Latin American tour, 35 agreements and cooperation documents were signed in different fields with Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba, and clarified that the foreign policy of his government is based on maintaining relations with the whole world. In India, on Friday, authorities report at least 5 dead and more than 20 injured after the impact of the cyclone Biparjoy. The two people who lost their lives in the last sinister, father and son, died while trying to save their flocks of sheep in the city of Bangnagar. Meanwhile, emergency workers of India's National Disaster Response Force are in duty of joining in forceful cleanup activities in the part of the western coastal state of Gujarat after cyclone Biparjoy made landfall. Several Indian families have had to take shelter in safer places, and more than 180,000 people were displaced between the Indian state of Gujarat and the neighboring Pakistani province of Sindh before it made landfall due to sustained winds of up to 125 kilometers per hour. In the United States, at least 3 people died and more than 100 were injured after multiple tornadoes hit Perryton County in Texas. According to Perryton Fire Department Chief Paul Dutcher, one of the people killed was in a mobile home parked that took a direct hit from a tornado. Daughter photos added that at least 30 trailers were damaged or destroyed by the tornado. Meanwhile, multiple witnesses confirmed that 3 tornadoes were spotted on the ground in Petersburg just after 5 p.m. local time on Thursday. Likewise, health staff of Ochiltre General Hospital confirmed they treated over 100 patients related to tornadoes injuries. The ones ranged from minor to severe, and multiple patients were transferred to trauma centers. A group of 9 Spanish female scientists concluded a mission that simulated life in Mars. The Hypatia-1 mission conducted a space analog facility in the Utah Desert in the United States. It's primarily aimed at making women more visible in space exploration and promote scientific vocations among young girls. At present, there is a gender gap in this field, with only 27% of scientists being women. The mission ran of April 16 and the 29th and helped study living conditions with minimum use of water, with participants eating dehydrated food, rationing their drinking water, taking care a garden which provided soy sprouts that were the only source of fresh food, and maintaining hygiene in that order. They also conducted scientific experiments that led to innovation. The second Hypatia mission is already in the making for 2025. And with this news, we have come to the end of this brief. You can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I am Heidy Maurell. Thank you for watching.